had just given birth when the government sent me on a top-secret mission. I spent 7 years deep undercover, my identity wiped from the world. 7 years later, the mission finally ended. I was granted leave to return home and reunite with my family. My heart hammered against my ribs as I imagined seeing my husband and children again. I had missed them every single second of every day. But the moment my car pulled up to the driveway, my blood ran cold. My precious son and daughter were being cornered by 3 massive German shepherds. The beasts were snapping at them, their teeth inches from the children's skin. I saw red. I lunged forward, my movements a blur of trained instinct. With a few sharp kicks, I sent the dogs flying, their aggressive snarls turning into pained whimpers. My 10-year-old son, Caleb, instinctively pulled his little sister behind him. His face was ghostly pale, his small body trembling uncontrollably. My 8-year-old daughter, Mila, snapped out of her daze and looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. She didn't recognize me, but she was frantic for my safety. "Ma'am, you have to run. Please just go," she sobbed. "You hit her dogs. When Daddy finds out, he'll never let you go." I forced down the white-hot rage simmering in my chest. My heart ached as I reached out to them, my voice softening. "She set those dogs on you," I said firmly. "Even if your father were here, he would have protected you just like I did." The moment the words left my mouth, both children's eyes filled with tears. They looked devastated, not comforted. Before I could ask what was wrong, a shrill, arrogant voice pierced the air from the porch. "You bitch. I am the woman Marcus Sterling chose himself. I am the true mistress of this estate." A woman stepped forward, her eyes flashing with malice. She looked at my children like they were filth on her designer shoes. "You and these 2 little bastards who keep dirtying up my house. None of you are getting away with this today." I froze, stunned by her audacity. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed my husband's number. "Marcus Sterling," I said the moment the line picked up. "You better give me a damn good explanation for this sister, who just appeared out of nowhere. And while you're at it, tell me why the house I left for Caleb and Mila has a new owner." 7 years ago, an emergency mission forced me to fake my death and vanish. My identity was sealed as I headed into the most dangerous territories overseas. To compensate for my sacrifice, my superiors had granted me this luxury estate in the heart of the city. It was worth hundreds of millions, intended to be a stronghold for my children while I was gone. I never imagined that my own flesh and blood would be treated like intruders in their own home. I never thought they would be hunted like prey in their own yard. Anger pulsed through my veins as I waited for Marcus to answer. But when the call finally connected, it wasn't his voice on the other end. "Who is this crazy woman now?" A haughty female voice snapped. "Mr. Sterling only takes calls from Miss Sienna when he's at dinner. You little gold diggers need to learn your place. Stop calling and get a life." The line went dead before I could even utter a word. I stood there, staring at the screen in disbelief. I knew Marcus had a rule about not taking calls during dinner, but he had told me, personally, that I was the only exception. That was why I had kept my old number for 7 years, even while living under a ghost identity. I was terrified he would feel guilty if he ever missed a call from me, but it seemed his only exception had been replaced. For 7 years, the thought of Marcus had been the only thing keeping me alive through gunfire and shadows. To be discarded the moment I returned felt like a knife to the heart. Sienna Thorne saw my stunned expression and let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "And here I thought you had some real backing. Turns out you're just another pathetic groupie trying to climb into his bed. Know your place, honey. You aren't even worth the dirt on my heels." I closed my eyes, taking a long, slow breath to keep my lethal training from taking over. Honestly, I could have accepted Marcus finding someone else. I knew the risks of my mission. I didn't expect him to play the grieving widower forever. But he had promised me. He swore he would protect our children and ensure they had a happy life. Yet here was Caleb, looking like a skeleton in oversized clothes, and Mila, her face sallow and thin. They were at the age where they should be growing, but they looked like they could blow away in the wind. Seeing them huddled together, covered in bruises and scars, made my soul scream. "Sweethearts, don't be scared," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm taking you away from here." I took their small hands in mine. I didn't even care about the house or the woman anymore. I just wanted to get them to safety and care for them. I had 7 years of lost time to make up for. I wouldn't waste another second. But apparently, some people just don't know when to quit while they're ahead. "Leaving? You think you can just hit my dogs and walk away?" Sienna sneered. "Security. Grab them. All of them. You want to play the hero, you little slut? I'll show you who really runs the city." The guards began to close in. The 3 dogs I'd kicked were scrambled back to their feet, growling low in their throats, ready to pounce. I immediately pushed the children behind my back. "Sienna Thorne, don't you dare." I barked. With my training, these 12 guards wouldn't last 3 minutes against me. But with 2 terrified children right behind me, I had to be careful. My moves were designed to kill, not to subdue. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, Caleb broke free from my grip. "Miss Sienna, please. Just let Mila and this lady go. He threw himself at Sienna's feet, sobbing and pleading, his small forehead hitting the pavement as he bowed. Punish me. Do whatever you want to me, just don't hurt them. Don't hurt my sister. Mila has been sick since she was little. She can't take another beating. Please, I'm begging you. Caleb. Caleb, no. Mila cried out, her voice cracking. She lunged forward, shivering as she knelt beside her brother, clutching the hem of Sienna's dress. Miss Sienna, please don't hit him. We'll go. We'll leave right now. I don't want the picture of Mommy anymore. We'll leave the Sterling house and never bother you or Dad. Or Mr. Sterling again. Please. Their heartbreaking cries felt like a serrated blade sawing through my chest. I felt like I couldn't breathe. A picture. All of this was over a single photograph of me. My children had been tortured and starved just because they wanted to know what their mother looked like. For 7 long years, I had been fighting for a world they were supposed to be safe in. What had I done? The sight was so pathetic that even a few of the guards began to hesitate. I mean, they are Mr. Sterling's kids, one whispered. They're so small. So what? Does it look like Marcus cares? Another retorted. Miss Sienna is the one who makes the calls around here. Exactly. Did you forget last winter? She made them kneel in the snow all night. They ended up in the ICU with pneumonia, and Marcus didn't even visit once. I clenched my fists so hard my nails drew blood from my palms. Sienna remained unmoved, looking down at the children with nothing but disgust. Now you're begging? It's too late. My dogs are elite champions. Each one is worth millions. I could sell both of you into a labor camp, and you still wouldn't be able to pay for their trauma. The children's faces went white. Their sobs turned into silent, desperate tremors. Then, Sienna turned her gaze toward me, her lip curling in a smirk. Why don't you ask your brave little savior here? If she pays for the damages, maybe I'll consider letting you two live. She scanned my simple, travel-worn clothes, her eyes dripping with condescension. She clearly thought I was a nobody. The guards began to mutter again. Yes, she should pay. She's the one who hit the dogs. If she hadn't interfered, this wouldn't be such a mess. But the dogs were going to kill those kids. Those shepherds are huge. One bite and that girl's arm would have been snapped like a twig. Doesn't matter. Look at her. She looks like she couldn't afford a Happy Meal, let alone $1 million vet bill. Suddenly, a tiny, cold hand grabbed mine. Mila looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was surprisingly steady. Ma'am, you only did it to save us. It's not your fault. Don't give her anything. Caleb wiped his eyes and stood up, trying to look brave. You should run, you're fast and strong. They won't catch you. She won't let us go anyway. We don't want you to get hurt because of us. In that moment, my vision blurred. My beautiful, selfless children. How could you, Marcus? How could you let them become like this? I took a deep breath and placed my hands on their shoulders, my voice as cold as tempered steel. Don't be afraid, my loves. From this second on, no one will ever lay a finger on you again. I stood up straight, my eyes locking onto Sienna's. The air around me seemed to drop 20 degrees. If you want these children, you'll have to go through me. You want to play the big boss? Fine. I'll give you a show you'll never forget. Sienna's face twisted with rage. She screeched at the top of her lungs. Guards, beat her. I want to see her fed to the dogs piece by piece. The guards shared a look and began to lung toward me. But before the first blow could land, a thunderous roar erupted from the estate gates. Stop. Everybody stop. Marcus Sterling had arrived. He stepped out of his black SUV, looking every bit the high-powered CEO in his tailored suit. Behind him scurried the flashy secretary who had hung up on me. The moment Marcus saw me, he froze. His jaw dropped, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Sabrina? Sabrina Vaughn? You're alive. If I weren't, I wouldn't have been able to see you let your mistress hunt my children for sport. I spat, a cold smile touching my lips. The yard exploded into whispers. What? Sabrina Vaughn? The late Mrs. Sterling. I thought she died 7 years ago. If the real wife is back, then Miss Sienna is in big trouble. Please, she's been gone for 7 years. Who knows what she was doing or who she was with? Sienna is the one Marcus actually loves now. My children stood frozen, staring at me in shock. Mommy, Caleb whispered, his voice trembling with hope. Mommy, you're really Mommy. Mila wailed, throwing herself into my arms. You're alive. Why did it take so long? We missed you so much. Daddy burned all your pictures. They wouldn't let us see you. They smashed the rocking horse and the little library you built for us. Caleb said you made a beautiful princess room for me, but they tore it down to make a kennel for the dogs. I never even got to see it. My heart shattered into a million pieces. I pulled them both tight, letting them cry out all the years of pain and neglect. But the secretary's whiny voice interrupted us. Mr. Sterling, I know this is a surprise, but those dogs were your personal birthday gift to Miss Sienna. They've been brutally attacked. Poor Sienna is heartbroken. So they were all in on it. Sienna took the cue and immediately started sobbing, dabbing at her dry eyes. Marcus, I didn't want this to happen. The dogs just wanted to play with the kids. I didn't realize who she was. She just started hitting them. I was so scared. It's all my fault. If I had recognized her, I would have. Marcus's expression softened. He looked at her with pity. Don't blame yourself, Sienna. It's not not her fault. I cut him off, laughing at the sheer absurdity of his words. She set vicious dogs on children. She ordered guards to beat me. She threatened to feed me to animals. And you say it's not her fault. I stared him down, watching his face darken. Aside from the attempted murder today, you owe me a very clear explanation as to why the house I bought for my children is now registered to this woman. I don't owe you anything, Sabrina, Marcus said coldly. A few years ago, I was in a car accident. Sienna saved my life. This house was my way of thanking her. As for the children, I'll provide for them elsewhere. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Like what? A graveyard? Marcus choked on his words, looking caught out. It was obvious he hadn't given them a dime. Don't push your luck, Sabrina, he growled, narrowing his eyes. Apologize to Sienna right now, and I might consider letting you stay in the Sterling family. We can move past this. Otherwise, you'll be on the hook for the dog's medical bills, and we both know you can't afford that. Sienna and her secretary shared a smug, triumphant look. I took a deep breath, letting the last shred of my affection for this man wither and die. I looked him dead in the eye and spoke with total finality. I will never apologize. And as of right now, we are getting a divorce. The courtyard fell dead silent, save for the low, raspy wheeze of the injured German shepherds and the cold wind rustling through the towering pines. Marcus Sterling stared at me as if the word divorce were a foreign dialect he couldn't comprehend. His jaw tightened, the veins along his temples throbbing against his tan, pampered skin. Divorce? Marcus let out a dry, incredulous laugh. Sabrina, be realistic. You've been wandering around God knows where for 7 years. You have no career, no assets, no social standing. You look like you just walked off a cargo ship. You think you can walk away with my children? Your children? I echoed softly, my voice dropping into the deadly octave my unit commanders knew as the calm before the artillery strike. They carry my blood, Marcus said, stepping forward, his chest puffed out under his tailored three-piece suit. I am the CEO of Sterling Defense Logistics. I hold municipal contracts, private security infrastructure, and half the city council in my pocket. If you file for divorce, you will leave with nothing. No alimony, no custody, and not a single dime to your name. I will have you declared legally unfit before the morning docket clears. Beside him, Sienna Thorne had already dried her crocodile tears. She leaned into Marcus's arm, her ruby lips curving into a mocking sneer. Marcus, darling, don't be too hard on her, Sienna purred, running her manicured fingers down his lapel. She probably doesn't understand how the real world works. Why don't we let her work as a scullery maid in the staff quarters? That way, she can at least watch Caleb and Mila clean the kennels from her window. Mila whimpered, burying her face into the fabric of my tactical jacket, her tiny body trembling so violently I could feel her heartbeat hammering against my ribs. Caleb, barely 10 years old, stepped half an inch in front of me, his small fists clenched, trying desperately to shield his mother with 80 pounds of malnourished bone and muscle. My heart bled, and then it turned into cold, impenetrable titanium. You think this house belongs to you, Marcus? I asked, looking up at the sprawling 3-story neoclassical manor. The title is registered to the Sterling Thorne Living Trust, Marcus replied arrogantly. It was redeeded 3 years ago. If you step through those front doors, you are trespassing on private property. I didn't answer him. I reached into the inner pocket of my utility jacket, pulled out a matte black satellite phone with dual-band encryption, and pressed a single preset key. The line connected in less than 2 seconds. Command. A crisp, gravelly voice answered on the other end. Protocol Phoenix. I said evenly. Extraction team to my residential coordinates. Deploy Asset Recovery and Medical Transport Unit Alpha. Full. Lockdown on Municipal Asset 001. Understood, Commander Vaughn. Inbound ETA for minutes. I closed the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head with exaggerated pity. Playing pretend on a burner phone? Who did you call, Sabrina? Your old friends from the soup kitchen. You have 4 minutes to pack your mistress's clothes and get off this property, I told him. Sienna scoffed, waving a hand at the 12 security guards who were still standing around the perimeter. Guards, what are you waiting for? Throw this crazy woman and her brats into the street. If she resists, break her legs. The head guard hesitated, looking at Marcus. Marcus gave a curt, dismissive nod. Do it. But don't mark her face too much. I still want her to sign the voluntary Custody waiver tomorrow. For guards moved in, reaching for their collapsible batons. I didn't wait for them to close the distance. I took half a step forward, pivoting on my left heel. My right combat boot caught the lead guard beneath his sternum with 500 pounds of kinetic force. The man's breath exploded from his lungs in a wet gasp as he flew backward 6 feet, crashing into the hood of Marcus's black SUV, shattering the windshield into a web of white cracks. Before the second guard could unholster his taser, I closed the gap, swept his lead leg, and drove the heel of my palm into the side of his jaw. Crack. The man dropped like a sack of wet concrete. The remaining guards froze, their eyes widening in primal terror. They were private security guards paid $25 an hour to look intimidating. They had never faced an operative trained in high-threat neutralization. Sienna screamed, stumbling backward, catching her high heel on the stone curb, and tumbling onto the grass. Marcus's face turned from smug superiority to a sickly, mottled gray. What did you do? Marcus stammered, backing away toward the porch. Where did you learn to do that? Before he could take another step, the sky above the estate began to roar. The rhythmic, earth-shaking thrum of twin turboshaft engines rattled the stained glass windows of the manor. 2 unmarked matte black Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters dropped from the low cloud cover, hovering 50 feet above the manicured lawn. The rotor wash tore through the rose bushes, flattening Sienna's prized flower beds and sending lawn chairs spinning across the driveway. Ropes dropped from the open side doors. 12 operators in full tactical combat gear, bearing the insignia of the National Special Operations Command, fast roped down onto the cobblestone courtyard. Within 15 seconds, they had established a 360-degree security perimeter, their assault rifles held at low ready. Behind the tactical squad, a sleek armored Suburban with government plates pulled through the smashed wrought iron gates, followed by a state-of-the-art mobile intensive care ambulance. A tall, silver-haired man in a 4-star general's dress uniform stepped out of the Suburban. General Arthur Vance, the Deputy Director of National Intelligence. The security guards threw their batons onto the ground and dropped to their knees, their hands locked behind their heads in surrender. Marcus stood frozen on the porch, his eyes bulging, his mouth hanging open. General Vance? What? Why is the military on my property? General Vance didn't even acknowledge Marcus's existence. He walked with a crisp, measured stride straight past the shivering guards, stopped 3 feet in front of me, and snapped his right hand to the brim of his cap in a crisp, razor-sharp salute. Commander Vaughn, General Vance announced, his voice booming over the roar of the helicopter blades. Operation Black Sand is officially concluded. The Joint Chiefs commend you on 7 years of extraordinary valor. Welcome home, Sabrina. I returned the salute, my back straight, the fatigue of 7 years in the desert washing away under the cold afternoon sky. Thank you, General, I said softly. Caleb and Mila looked up at me, their eyes wide with disbelief and wonder. Caleb reached out, his small, trembling fingers touching the reinforced fabric of my sleeve. Mommy, Caleb whispered, his voice cracking with awe. You're a soldier? I'm your mother. I knelt down, wrapping both arms around them, kissing the crowns of their heads. And I'm never leaving you again. General Vance turned his gaze to the medical team rushing over with stretchers and warm blankets. Dr. Evans, conduct a comprehensive trauma and metabolic panel on the children immediately. Transport them to Walter Reed Private Pavilion. Yes, General. 2 female combat medics gently wrapped Caleb and Mila in thermal fleece blankets, lifting them into the warm, sterile interior of the armored ambulance. Mommy, come with us, Mila cried, reaching her tiny hand out from the ambulance doors. I'll be right behind you, my love, I promised, pressing a kiss to her palm. 5 minutes. Once the ambulance doors clicked shut, the warmth drained from the courtyard, leaving behind an atmosphere as cold as an open grave. I turned around to face Marcus and Sienna. Sienna was trembling violently on the grass, clutching Marcus's trouser leg, her mascara ruined by tears of genuine, paralyzing fear. Marcus tried to muster his composure, adjusting his tie with shaking hands, stepping in front of General Vance. General Vance, there has clearly been a misunderstanding, Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. I am Marcus Sterling, chairman of Sterling Logistics. We provide logistics support for the regional naval base. This woman abandoned our family 7 years ago. She broke into my estate and assaulted my private staff. General Vance looked at Marcus as if he were a cockroach crawling across a dining table. Your estate. General Vance pulled a heavy leather-bound portfolio from his aide's hands and opened it. 7 years ago, the general stated with clinical precision, Sabrina Vaughn volunteered for a classified strategic penetration mission behind enemy lines. In exchange for her sacrifice, Sovereign Defense Trust 09 was established. This $400 million estate, the surrounding 30 acres and 12 offshore investment portfolios were purchased directly by the Department of Defense and deeded exclusively to Commander Vaughn. General Vance turned the page, his eyes boring into Marcus's skull. Section 4, Clause B of the Sovereign Trust Mandate. Under no circumstances may marital assets or sovereign trust real estate be transferred, mortgaged or redeeded without the primary biometric clearance of Commander Sabrina Vaughn. General Vance stepped forward, thrusting the documents against Marcus's chest. 3 years ago, Marcus Sterling, you bribed a municipal notary and forged a death declaration to transfer this deed to yourself and your mistress. That constitutes high treason against a military officer on active duty, federal real estate fraud, and grand larceny of sovereign assets. Marcus's knees buckled. He grabbed the porch railing to keep from falling. No, she was declared dead. The government reported her transport went down over the Caspian Sea. Her cover was maintained to protect her children from foreign intelligence retaliation. General Vance roared. And you used that cover to starve her children, steal her home, and install a common escort in her bed. Sienna let out a shrill, hysterical shriek. I didn't know. Marcus told me the house was his. He told me the mother was a deadbeat who ran off with another man. I'm innocent. Marcus gave it to me. Shut up, Sienna. Marcus screamed, turning on her with wild, bloodshot eyes. You're the one who begged for the deed. You told me you wouldn't stay with me unless I put your name on the property. Enough, I spoke. The single word cut through their frantic bickering like a guillotine. I walked up the stone steps of the porch, stopping inches from Marcus. For 7 years, during the coldest nights in rebel-held valleys, during 48-hour interrogations where my ribs were cracked and my skin was burned, the memory of Marcus's smile had been my light. I had told myself, survive, Sabrina. Marcus is keeping the children safe. Marcus is waiting for you. Now looking into his hollow, cowardly eyes, I felt nothing. No hatred. No sorrow. Only the absolute, clean certainty of a surgeon cutting away necrotic flesh. You said earlier that Caleb and Mila were bastards who dirted up this house. I said softly. Marcus swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his neck. Sabrina. I was angry. I didn't mean it. We're husband and wife. We can fix this. Think of the children, they need a father. They had a father, I said, my voice dropping like a hammer. And he died the day he let his mistress hunt them with dogs. I turned to the tactical commander. Arrest them both. Strip them of all access to sovereign trust accounts. Seal the property for forensic audit. Yes, Commander. 4 armed operators lunged forward, forcing Marcus and Sienna to the ground, snapping steel zip ties around their wrists. As they dragged Marcus down the driveway, he thrashed wildly, screaming into the wind, Sabrina, you can't do this to me. I built this company. I have friends in the Senate. You'll regret this. Sabrina. I didn't look back. I stepped into the armored transport and closed the door. The private recovery suite at Walter Reed Medical Center was bathed in warm, soft lamplight. The floor was covered in plush rugs, the walls painted a calming lavender, and the large French windows looked out over a quiet, private courtyard filled with blooming cherry blossoms. Caleb and Mila were sitting in the middle of a massive king-sized bed, wearing soft cotton pajamas. In front of them sat a low wooden table covered in steaming bowls of chicken, noodle soup, fresh strawberries, warm rolls with honey butter, and cups of hot cocoa topped with marshmallows. They weren't eating like normal children. They were eating with frantic, wide-eyed desperation, shoving food into their mouths as if they expected someone to snatch the plates away at any second. My heart seized with a suffocating ache. I walked into the room carrying a tray of warm apple tarts. When the floorboards creaked, Caleb instinctively dropped his spoon, scrambled across the mattress, and pulled Mila behind his back, his body tense, ready to absorb a blow. When he saw it was me, the tension melted from his small shoulders, replaced by an expression of deep, heart-wrenching shame. Mommy, Caleb whispered, lowering his head. I'm sorry, Miss Sienna said. She said if we ate between meals, we were greedy pigs who deserved to be locked in the dark. I set the tray down, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled both of them into my lap. Caleb, Mila, look at me, I said, gently lifting their chins. Their dark, intelligent eyes looked into mine, moist with unshed tears. In this family, I said, my voice thick with emotion, you can eat whenever you're hungry. You can laugh as loud as you want. You can play until you fall asleep. You will never, ever be locked in the dark again. I swear to you on my life. Mila wrapped her arms around my neck, burying her face into my collarbone, letting out a long, shuddering sob that seemed to release 7 years of trapped terror. Mommy. She burned your pictures, Mila wept. I was trying to remember your voice. Every night before bed, Caleb would whisper to me that you were beautiful and that you loved us, but I was so scared I was forgetting your face. I'm here, my sweet girl, I whispered, rocking her gently, tears finally slipping down my own cheeks. I'm right here, and I will never let anyone make you forget again. Dr. Evans, the chief pediatric surgeon, knocked softly on the open door and stepped in holding a digital tablet. She gave me a somber, meaningful look. I tucked the children beneath the heavy duvet, kissed their foreheads, and stepped out onto the private balcony with the doctor. How bad is it? I asked, leaning against the stone balustrade. Dr. Evans let out a heavy sigh, flipping through the diagnostic imagery. Mila has chronic lung scarring consistent with untreated walking. Pneumonia, likely from prolonged exposure to freezing temperatures without adequate clothing. Caleb has 2 healed hairline fractures in his right forearm and severe malnutrition-induced bone density loss. Both children are in the 5th percentile for weight. The doctor looked up at me, her eyes filled with professional fury. Commander, this wasn't neglect. This was systematic, prolonged torture. If they had remained in that house for another 6 months, Mila's respiratory system would have suffered permanent, irreversible collapse. I closed my eyes. The wind blowing off the Potomac River was cold, but the fire burning inside my chest could have incinerated an entire city. Keep them on round-the-clock nutritional therapy and respiratory rehabilitation, I said. I have business to conclude in the city. What kind of business, Commander? I opened my eyes. They were cold, clear, and lethal. A total liquidation. 3 days later, the grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel was filled with 500 of the city's most influential figures. Corporate executives, federal contractors, city council members, and high society philanthropists. Tonight was the annual Sterling Defense Logistics Gala, the high-water mark of Marcus Sterling's social calendar. Marcus had managed to secure a 72-hour emergency bail bond through a corrupt municipal judge. Using his company's offshore cash reserves, he was determined to use tonight's gala to control the narrative. He wore a pristine black tuxedo, a diamond watch on his wrist, holding a glass of vintage champagne. Beside him stood Sienna, wearing an emerald green couture gown, her neck dripping with emeralds Marcus had purchased using company credit. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus smiled smoothly, addressing the circle of journalists and corporate partners surrounding him. The rumors you may have heard regarding my domestic affairs are nothing more than a targeted smear campaign orchestrated by corporate competitors. My late wife's family is attempting a hostile takeover of my estate. But tonight, Sterling Logistics is proud to announce our $60 million defense supply contract with the Department of Homeland Security. The guests applauded politely, though the murmurs of uncertainty lingered in the air. And furthermore, Marcus raised his glass, smiling down at Sienna. I am thrilled to announce my formal engagement to Miss Sienna Thorne, the true pillar of my life and the woman who saved my bang. The heavy mahogany double doors at the back of the ballroom were thrown open with explosive force. The lights in the grand chandelier flickered and died, replaced by the blinding, high-intensity beams of tactical spotlights sweeping across the room. The music stopped. The guests gasped, dropping their champagne flutes as the crystal shattered against the marble floor. A platoon of federal marshals and military police in dress blues strode down the center aisle, forming a double-column escort. And walking between them was me. I wore the full-dress uniform of a Navy commander, midnight blue wool gold epaulets, 3 rows of combat decorations, and the Medal of Distinguished Valor, pinned above my heart. My dark hair was pulled into a severe, elegant military chignon. My medals clinked softly with every rhythmic, authoritative step. Beside me walked the United States Attorney for the Eastern District and the Inspector General of the Department of Defense. When Marcus saw me, his champagne glass slipped from his fingers, crashing onto the carpet, splashing vintage Dom Perignon over his polished shoes. Sabrina? Marcus gasped, his voice carrying across the dead silence of the ballroom. Sienna shrieked, backing away from the podium, clutching her emerald necklace as if it could protect her from the storm. I stopped at the foot of the stage, looking up at them. The U.S. Attorney stepped forward, unrolling a multi-page federal indictment, stamped with the presidential seal. Marcus Sterling. Sienna Thorne. The U.S. Attorney announced through the House microphone, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. By order of the Grand Jury of the United States, you are hereby placed under immediate federal custody. The room erupted into shocked gasps. News cameras swarmed forward there, flashbulbs blinding the stage. On what charges? Marcus roared, his face turning purple with desperate rage. I am a defense contractor. You cannot arrest me at my own gala. Count 1. The Inspector General read from the dossier. Embezzlement of $68 million in classified sovereign trust defense funds. Count 2. Forgery of federal death certificates and treasonous appropriation of military sovereign assets. Count 3. Child endangerment, aggravated assault on minors, and felony torture, resulting in severe bodily harm. The giant presentation screens flanking the ballroom stage suddenly flickered to life. Instead of the Sterling Logistics corporate logo, the screens displayed the high-resolution medical scans of Caleb's fractured arm and Mila's scarred lungs, alongside the audio recording of Sienna ordering the guards to feed the children to the dogs. The entire ballroom recoiled in horror. Several high society women covered their mouths, crying out in disgust. Corporate partners who had been shaking Marcus's hand 30 seconds ago backed away from him as if he were carrying a lethal plague. "You monster," a city councilwoman spat, throwing her drink directly into Marcus's face. Sienna fell to her knees on the stage, wailing hysterically. It was Marcus. Marcus forged the papers. Marcus beat the boy when he asked for food. I was just following his orders. "You lying snake." Marcus screamed, lunging at Sienna, grabbing her hair and dragging her across the stage before 2 federal marshals tackled him to the floor, driving his face into the hardwood boards. Click-clack. The heavy steel handcuffs locked around Marcus's wrists. I walked up the stage steps and stood over him. Marcus thrashed against the floor, looking up at my polished combat boots, his face bleeding from the impact with the wood. "Sabrina." He wept, tears of pure, unadulterated terror streaming down his cheeks. "Sabrina, please. I'm their father. You loved me. Tell them to stop. Tell them it's a family matter." I looked down at the man who had traded his honor, his family, and his soul for a handful of stolen gold and the shallow flattery of a viper. "You are not their father, Marcus," I said, my voice echoing across the ballroom with the finality of a closing tomb. "You are just a cautionary tale about what happens when a coward steals from a warrior." I turned to the lead marshal. "Take them out." 6 months later, the summer sun rose over the coastal cliffs of Maine, painting the Atlantic Ocean in brilliant ribbons of gold and rose. The new estate sat high on a bluff overlooking the waves, a warm timber and stone lodge, surrounded by towering evergreens, wild blueberry bushes, and a sweeping lawn that stretched down to a private sandy cove. I stood on the wraparound cedar deck, holding a mug of steaming black coffee, breathing in the crisp, clean salt air. Down in the yard, the sound of bright, bell-like laughter echoed into the morning sky. "Caleb, pass it. I'm open." Mila was running across the grass in bright red sneakers, her face glowing with health, her cheeks round and flushed with vitality. Her hair, once dull and brittle, shone like dark silk in the morning sun. Caleb kicked the soccer ball with a clean, powerful strike, sending it sailing across the lawn straight into the net between 2 birch trees. "Goal!" Caleb cheered, throwing his arms in the air, running over to scoop his little sister into a bear hug. He had gained 15 pounds of healthy muscle. His back was straight, his eyes bright, fearless, and full of life. A sleek black retriever came bounding across the grass, barking happily, dropping a tennis ball at Caleb's feet, its tail wagging like a metronome. Not an attack beast trained to terrify children. A companion trained to love them. I smiled, feeling a profound, untouchable warmth bloom in the deepest chambers of my chest. Marcus Sterling was currently serving a 32-year sentence in the federal maximum security penitentiary at Florence, Colorado, with no possibility of parole. His company had been liquidated, his assets redistributed to establish a national foundation for abused military dependents. Sienna Thorne was serving 18 years at the state correctional facility for women stripped of every jewel, every dress, and every penny she had ever stolen. The shadows were gone. The battlefield was silent. "Mommy, come play," Mila shouted, waving frantically from the grass, her smile brighter than the morning sun. "Coming, my loves," I called back. I set my coffee mug down on the cedar table, took off my jacket, and ran down the wooden steps into the warm grass, laughing as my children rushed to pull me into their light. I was home, and my fortress was unbreakable.